This is going to be weird. I was telling somebody earlier, I've got to have this. This is more for me to keep myself straight than for you. So I have to, this is kind of complicated what I'm talking about. I want to kind of give you a visual, but also keep it straight in my head while I'm telling you, because I'd really hate to confuse me, which is worse than confusing you. It kind of flows downhill that way. Anybody know what today is? Palm Sunday. Anybody know what that means? It's actually the entry of Jesus into Jerusalem, right? Passover week. So I was talking with Ella this week, and she thought we should decorate the stage for Easter. And I said, well, what would it look like? She said, eggs, big, huge eggs. And I was like, bunnies, candy. I was like, well, the candy sounds good. But I said, Easter is not really about eggs and bunnies and stuff. I said, Easter is really about, and I went and told her, I was talking to her about what Easter was about. And she said, well, maybe we should build a tomb. Like, okay, it's Friday. So, but she thinks her paw can build anything out of wood. So why not just build a tomb and a big stone? And she said, a big stone. How big? She said, big as the stage. I was like, wow, it's quite a stone. So anyway, we were talking about it. And I really wanted to talk today about what Easter is. Because as we enter this week, you're going to hear a lot of things. This is the Holy Week, supposedly the Holy Week. And I want to talk to you about what Easter is and why Easter is extremely important to me. I think a lot of times we get into a religious trap at Easter and we miss, or maybe you don't even know what actually is going on. So I want to kind of teach a little bit about what actually is going on, and then I want to kind of make a point at the end about what Easter really is to me. So as we celebrate Easter, it's really a celebration of a new covenant of the old feast that was Passover. A lot of your Jewish friends, this is a holy week because this is Passover. It's one of the most holy weeks of the year. But what is Passover and why is that significant to us? Well, Passover commemorates the night that the children of Israel were in Egypt and they were in bondage. They'd been in bondage for 400 years in Egypt. And you remember Moses going to Pharaoh. You've seen the movie, Let My People Go. And I will not, I will not, I will not. It's one of those back and forth things. And, you got the plagues. And the final plague, God says that to paint the blood of the lamb on the doorpost, and the death angel will pass over your home, but the death angel wouldn't pass over Egypt, that all of the firstborn sons of Egypt would be killed. The firstborns would be taken. And so the death angel passed over, and the children of Israel, Pharaoh then released the children of Israel, and they go out into the desert, and they wander for 40 years, and they find themselves in the promised land. So that's kind of that's the real short version, but that's kind of the short version of the story. Now, what's significant about that is God then gives them a law to commemorate, to always remember, to hand down generation to generation to generation to generation, a celebration of that time. Now, this is a law that God says is a permanent law for all time. Which, when I read that, I thought, does that mean me? That was my first, because if God says this is permanent, then like my definition of permanent would be permanent. So we got this law, and that God has given us permanent. Now, there's a couple of ways I look at this. One is this law is either permanent and we still must be following it, or something happened to fulfill God's completion of this law and not nullify it, but fulfill it. And there's a difference between stopping it and fulfilling it. Fulfilling is to make it complete or to have it serve its purpose out. So that's what's going on here. Now, significant about this is that when this festival takes place, it had taken place the first time 40 years after the children of Israel had left Egypt. They enter into the Promised Land. They actually cross into the Promised Land on the 10th day of Nisan. Now, this is important because the 10th day of Nisan begins this countdown to Passover, and this is God's law to do Passover. So there's some significance to what goes on here. But by the 14th day of Nisan on the Jewish calendar then marks when it's the day of preparation. On the 14th day of Nisan in Egypt was the day that the Passover meal, the Passover meal was prepared. The death angel would pass over, they would eat the Passover meal, they would exit out of Egypt. So God wants to commemorate this. So as they go into the Promised Land, the first thing they do is they observe a Passover. Now it's significant that the children of Israel enter into the Promised Land on this same week. Then, hundreds of years later, on that same 10th of Nisan, Jesus comes into the city of Jerusalem, right? It's important. We call it Palm Sunday. They were laying down palm branches. But what you have here is Messiah coming into Jerusalem to observe Passover with his friends according to the laws of God. Okay, so what I want to kind of get in your mind to start with is how this thing actually works. Now, if you want to understand how the Jewish calendar and how the Jewish days work, you need to know that sundown is where the day ends and a new day begins. This is very, very important. Ours is at midnight. So we get confused when we read our Bibles, first of all, because we got our days at midnight, and their next day starts at sundown. Now, if I'm on top of the Temple Mount, sundown is different than when I'm on the bottom of the Temple Mount, right? So there's a fluctuation behind when sundown is. A lot of people said sundown is when the sun completely disappears from the horizon. But if you're on the second floor of your house, then the day don't start as early as it does downstairs, right? So there's this period of time between sundown and when the third star is lit at night. The third star comes out, and it's the third star that can see brightly. That time of night is known as the twinkling of an eye. It's very important. Have you heard that, twinkling of an eye, before? Okay, the twinkling of an eye is a time that no one really knows when it is, but it's when the third star appears after sundown. Everybody good with that? All right. So we got sundown at 6 o'clock. So what happens is Jesus comes into Jerusalem. Now he knows he's preparing for Passover. So he goes through the thing, and you've read the story. And I'm going to try to make this short as possible. And if I leave out some stuff, it may not make sense. So I'm going to try to be short but complete, because I think you'll see some things that will be significant. Okay, so Jesus comes in 10th of Nisan, right? So it's the 10th. He knows that day of preparation is the 14th of Nisan. So we got the 14th of Nisan. That's a 4. The 14th of Nisan starts at sundown, and we'll call it 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock. We'll say 6 o'clock. All right. Typically, a lot of Jews use 6 o'clock as the next day starting. Okay, so we'll use 6 o'clock. Let's put it in our context. Our sun is going down about 7, I guess, now at this time of year. So at 7 o'clock, the next day starts. So we've got the 13th of Nisan, coming up at sundown starts the day of preparation, okay? Now that's important because Jesus is meeting with his disciples and the day of preparation is coming. So they're going and they're getting things prepared. So Jesus is having a meal with his disciples. Now a lot of people would say, well, he's observing Passover with his disciples, but he can't be. Jesus can't be having the Passover meal with his disciples because on Passover, Jesus is on the cross. Okay, so he can't be having a Passover meal. So he is having a meal, and it's a meal in the upper room, and we know it as the Last Supper, right, where he's with the apostles. Also, it can't be a Passover meal because they're reclined at the table, they don't have their shoes on, things like that. The Passover meal is you're standing up, you're dressed, you're fully ready because that's what they did when they were getting ready to leave out of Egypt. So on the 13th, he's having a meal, okay? Sun goes down on the 13th after their meal. This is the Last Supper, okay? Sun goes down. Then the events start to take place that night. Okay, but that's the 14th of Nisan. What's the 14th of Nisan? Day of preparation, right? Okay, on the day of preparation is the day that the sacrificial lamb is slain. On the 10th, the lamb is selected. On the 14th, the lamb is slain, and we're getting ready for Passover, okay? So at 6 o'clock on the 13th, Jesus is having a meal in the upper room, and the events start to unfold all night long. You see all of this going on. Jesus goes to the garden to pray with his friends. After he goes to the garden to pray, then he's arrested at the garden. He's taken back and forth between the Jews and the Romans, and it ends up the morning of the 14th, going into the day, the events of Jesus' crucifixion start to take place, right? So the 14th of Nisan, then we have the crucifixion take place. Now, you got to remember, this is 6 o'clock, okay? It's important. This is 6 o'clock. So the 14th of Nisan at 6 o'clock. Now, some events while Jesus is on the cross on the 14th of Nisan are going on. It's between the evenings, okay? Between the evenings. What's between the evenings mean? Between the evenings is the time period between noon, between where the sun's at its highest, and sundown. So between the evenings on the day of preparation, you have Jesus crucified. Everybody with me? Maybe you're like, this is elementary, Todd. Get on with it. Know this. Okay, so Jesus is crucified. Now, Jesus has to come off the cross. Does anybody know why Jesus has to be taken off the cross by sundown? Because they say, the Jews tell the Romans, it's a Sabbath. We need him off of the cross by sundown. There's some significance here. Like the Jews are saying, break his legs. They're telling the Romans what to do. Now, why would you think the Jews would tell the Romans to break his legs? Because if he was the Messiah, he can't have a broken bone. And if he is Messiah, that puts the Jews in power out of business. Okay? Everybody with me? Break his legs. The Romans don't break his legs. They pierce his side, find him to already be dead, and they take him off the cross because the next day is a Sabbath, right? That's why he has to be off. Well, so that means at 6 o'clock, Sabbath starts, and nothing can be done on Sabbath. So we need them off of the cross because of Sabbath, right? It's the Sabbath. Okay, the Sabbath lasts from sundown on the 14th to sundown on the 15th. That's 24 hours, okay? So then you've got the 16th, the day after a Sabbath. Is everybody with me? From 6 o'clock till 6 o'clock that evening. All right. So what happens then is we have Jesus crucified, He has to be taken off the cross at 6 o'clock. This is a Sabbath. So this is the day after a Sabbath. Now here's what jacked me up when I was a kid. When is Good Friday? What's Good Friday? Anybody know? Tell me, come on, don't be shy. Day of crucifixion is the way we celebrate Good Friday. It's good because Jesus goes to the cross on Good Friday. But if my math is right, from here to here, and this being the next day, at best I'm getting 48 hours. If I stretch it by the minute, correct? Now, how many is 48 hours? Okay, did anybody else ever struggle with this? How Good Friday and Easter Sunday can be 3 days? That jacked me up forever. So I find a verse and says, Jesus walking out of the temple, and he says, see all these stones? You tear them down, and on the third day, I'll resurrect them, right? I'll rebuild it. So I'm like, oh man, that's weak, you have to admit. I mean, I can get the third day, first day, second day, third day, but still I'm getting 3 days over a 40-hour period. All right, does that bother anybody else but me? Okay, so that's kind of jacked up. And we wonder why our Jewish friends are like, you Christians are psycho. You're completely nuts. You don't get anything. All right. I also know that the 15th of Nisan is what? Day of preparation. Day 15th of Nisan is? Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread, right? So this is Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. All right. So this is Sabbath. But let me show you something. The day after, this is the way the law reads, the day following the first weekly Sabbath after Passover is the festival of first fruits. Okay? The day following the first weekly Sabbath is the festival of first fruits. This was not the festival of first fruits. And you'd have to go back and read what that is, but it's significant, okay? 17th of Nisan at 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock. Okay. For Jesus to be in the grave, now here's something Jesus said, right? And this was very specific. He said, they were like, give us a sign, just show us a sign. If you were Messiah, give us a sign. He says, I won't give you a sign except for this. The sign of the prophet Jonah. The sign of the prophet Jonah, that I will be in the belly of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. Blowing what out of the water? The third day period, right? The third day theory. I need 3 days and 3 nights. So we know crucifixion here has to come off the cross here. Jesus has to be in the grave by sundown. And where sundown is at that time, right, between 6, 7, 8, whatever period that is. So from here, I need 3 days and 3 nights. So I get 1, 2, 3, right? My math's right. Is everybody with me? I need 3 days and 3 nights, so I've got 1 day and 1 night. It's really a night and a day. So you got 1 day, 1 night, one day, 1 night, 1 day, 1 night. That's 3 days and 3 nights. That's significant, right? So how then do we have 3 days and 3 nights, have Jesus off the cross on the Sabbath, but have him resurrected? We know he's resurrected on first fruits. The first day after the Sabbath, the weekly Sabbath. Okay? So the 18th of Nisan is first fruits. The 17th of Nisan, 17th of Nisan is first fruits. Am I right? Is that right? Hang on, I'm lost now. The 18th is right. This is first fruits. This is the first day after Sabbath. So we know that the 17th is the weekly Sabbath, right? This is the weekly Sabbath. We know that God said on the weekly Sabbath, every 7 days, count off 7 days, and every 7 days there'll be a Sabbath. So there's a weekly Sabbath. But what we don't know is God says there are certain times of the year, these holy days, that are days where you'll do no regular work, Sabbaths. The holidays then become Sabbaths, the holy holidays. So this is what in the King James Bible calls a high Sabbath. All right? So the day before, the reason Jesus had to come off the cross wasn't because the next day was Saturday, the regular Sabbath. He had to come off the cross because the next day was Passover, the annual Sabbath. Okay, so he comes off, he's off the cross, he's in the grave. No one can do any work. No one can do anything. So the next day, they gather and get ready to take care of the body. So they prepare the burial spices and stuff, right? But at 6 o'clock, they can't do anything again because it's a Sabbath again. So the next night at 6 o'clock, it's already getting dark. So the 18th in the morning, Mary goes to the grave with her prepared spices to find what? An angel. Saying, why are you looking for him? Didn't he say he would be gone? So, from this scenario, Jesus then would be crucified on a Wednesday, off the cross by 6 o'clock, making it Thursday, Friday, Sabbath. So when's resurrection? Sometime after 6 o'clock on the weekly Sabbath following Easter. Somewhere around a twinkling of an eye. Now, why is that important? Because you remember they put guards on Jesus' tomb. Jesus didn't rise in the morning. That's when the tomb was found empty. The guards had been running around all night trying to get a story together on what happened shortly after sundown in a twinkling of an eye. Is everybody with me? So what happens then? Jesus is crucified when the lamb was to be slain. He's crucified by a prophecy in an action, in a celebration that had gone on for hundreds of years. He comes in just as the lamb would be selected. He's crucified on the day of preparation just as the lamb would be slaughtered. He's sacrificed, the sign of Jonah, and returns in a twinkling of an eye on the festival of first fruits. Exactly as God laid out the feast and the festivals. Exactly. So the reason we keep Good Friday is because we love 3-day weekends. Let's just don't. Let's don't jack with our holidays, okay? But I want you to understand that Friday could not have been, the reason we say it was Friday is because we knew he had to be off the cross by the Sabbath. Here's the important thing is there's 4 high Sabbaths in it every year. The weekly Sabbath following the high Sabbath is first fruits. That's the way the law reads. It's the day after the weekly Sabbath following the high Sabbath, the first one. Now, we have Easter on Sunday every year, right? We do that because for church people. Because Easter on a Tuesday just don't cut it. But you got to remember, this day changes every year. So the date of Passover is always the 15th of Nisan. This Sabbath shifts. Sometimes you can have 3 Sabbaths in a week. The way the holidays fall, the way the days fall. So you got the day after the first weekly Sabbath is the festival of first fruits. So I fulfill then the entry, the day of preparation, resurrection. I think sometime between 7 and 8, 9 o'clock on Saturday night, the tomb is found empty on Sunday morning by Mary. All right. Now this is by the Bible, the way the events unfold according to the Jewish calendar. But there's more significance to it than just what's here. See, this is what everybody had been looking for every Passover. And the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they knew the signs, they knew the seasons, they knew the time. They were alert and they were ready. And when they saw Jesus come into Jerusalem on the 10th, they knew it was going down. They were on the verge of losing everything. They did everything they could to not let the prophecies be fulfilled, and at every turn they fulfilled them. Proving over and over and over and over again that Jesus is Messiah. Now, why is this significant? Why do we celebrate Easter? The cross, the preparation day, the crucifixion, the Good Wednesday. I'm not like you guys. I think you just take off from Wednesday on. I mean, Good Friday, I'm losing 2 days. So you take Good Wednesday, and that's awesome. And you have resurrection. Now, what happens in between here? It's a whole different discussion. All right, we'll save that for another time. But in the twinkling of an eye, you have the return of Messiah from the grave. Do you not? What happens then when Messiah returns? It's a new world. Restoration. Things that were old pass away. Everything changed. See, we don't get it. We were born in this age. We were born in the age of Messiah. We were born at a time when kingdom of heaven was at hand. We were born in a time where Jesus had overcome death, hell, and the grave. We were born in that time. God is not far. God is near. My Jesus is here with me. The kingdom of heaven is in fact at hand. Everything changed, but we don't understand it because we were born into it. But for these people, Sunday, Monday, way different. Way different than the next Monday. Everything changed. Everything changed. Now this day starts a clock. Bam, go. 50 days later, Penta, 57 sevens in the next day, 50, Pentecost happens. What happens at Pentecost? The culmination of the new heaven and the new earth. God is at hand. God isn't far, but God comes here. He makes himself personal. Pentecost. There's a whole lot more to it. But what I want you to get is when we celebrate Easter, we're not celebrating a resurrection and going, oh, that was great. Good job, Jesus. It was awesome. We're not sad. Oh, that was the day Jesus went to the cross. Oh, sad. So sad. It's not what it's about. That's what religion would have you believe it's about. This day, this Sunday morning, is the restoration of God's world to God. Old things, the old system, the old way of being, the old life is completely done. It's done. I will no longer write my laws in books to be read, but I will write my laws on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. This is the new world. This is a new world where I don't need anybody to give me rules because God is in me and He's convicting me and transforming me and changing me and drawing me into His kingdom and into His will all the time. This is a new world that has come. Easter isn't a mark of a religious holiday, but it's the celebration that God is with His people, that this is a new world, that this is a new day, and that nothing will ever overcome God and His kingdom again. The gates of hell will never prevail against God's kingdom ever. We're celebrating life. We're celebrating the first fruits. Do you know what happened when Jesus came out of the grave? The dead came out with Him. Not to ever go back. It was indeed finished. That's what we celebrate Easter for. Because we don't live under a law and our God is not far away. The kingdom of heaven is here. Our God is at hand. He's within us. He's walking with us. He came to give us life and life to the full. We don't have to live that way any longer. We celebrate because we don't have to wait for another time. We're not waiting on another time. We're celebrating because God is with us. We're celebrating because the kingdom of heaven is at hand. We're celebrating because heaven and earth had passed away and the new heaven and the new earth had come. Everything changed that morning. Everything. And that's why I celebrate Easter. You guys will stand with me. I'll pray for you.